Welcome to the Fun Astrology Weekly Overview video. I'm Thomas Miller. Thank you for joining us. We had a tough week last week. Let's see if we can find some healing and some subtle energies to lock onto in this chart. And I want you to imprint something in your mind as we get started. And somebody corrected me on the pronunciation of this. It's Oklahoma, you know, I mean, it's like, that's where I grew up. Pierre Teilhard, no D, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Anyway, French has always confused me, but Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. It's like Pierre Teilhard, no D, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. His famous quote. That's a good way to get started, isn't it? See what the week is going to be like? So his quote, "We are not human beings having a spiritual experience along the way. We are spiritual beings having a human experience." And that contrast and that separation is huge this week. Let's start with a couple of things in the chart. The moon is in Sagittarius as we begin the week, and that was from Saturday morning when it moved into Sagittarius. It leaves there at 9:45 Monday evening after just a very short void of course and enters Capricorn. So you have Monday with a Sagittarius moon, and then for the next couple of days, a Capricorn moon. But the two that I wanted to focus on, let's start over here with the sun, because this was certainly a factor in last week's situation, that the sun is moving, and now today, Sunday, is within orb of a conjunction of the south node of the moon. And, you know, sometimes I think we idolize the nodes more than we might should. In Vedic astrology, it's the symbol of the dragon. You want the head of the dragon or you want the tail of the dragon. And what this chart is moving towards, or what the sun is moving toward in Virgo, is obviously the tail of the dragon. So this is the yucky stuff. This is the karma that is in there that we brought with us. We're going to look to the other side of the chart to figure it out. And then also, the way Robert Glasscock interpreted it, it is the tail of the dragon. It is the buried that needs to come to the surface. So if you look at your own nodes and your nodal path that way in your own natal chart, you'll see both interpretations. You absolutely will. But typically, and for broadly, we tend to look at the south node as those things that are buried, that are recessed. And that came out certainly this week. So we have a wonky moon wobble in process. That's pretty much the heads up configuration. And then we have Saturn now, early Monday morning. That happens at 4:06 Eastern, Monday morning. Saturn tips itself into Pisces. Obviously, now your eyes should be figuring the Great Pyramid. It should be in every chart. I have this with 0 at the ascendant, 0 Aries at the ascendant. So we're looking at it from the natural zodiacal flow of the zodiac. But as Saturn sticks its toe back into Pisces for 5 degrees, now it will come back out the end of November, and it will have retraced 5 degrees back into Pisces. We will come back to Saturn in Pisces in just a minute. I have a few other thoughts on that I wanted to go into. But there's one other piece of this that I think we should also focus on, and that is Jupiter is in this positive aspect back to those nodes of the moon. In fact, I wanted to show you the positive aspects first. We have Mercury in a trine to Chiron. We have Venus in a sextile to Uranus. I mean, the major structure of this chart is positively connected. Now, let me show you the other side of the coin. We were talking about the yin and yang of this chart. Well, here is some of that yin and yang. Let's look at the more challenging, tense aspects. Notice we have a yod right there in the chart. I wanted to point that out. Kristin and I are going to pick this yod apart together on Wednesday on video and do kind of a midweek touch base on seeing how we're doing. And we are going to take a look at this piece by piece, but it is exactly the same thing because Mercury is at the apex, at the top of this. We have the elongated triangle, the yod, the fated kind of finger of God this is this is showing us exactly what we should be looking at, with Pluto in a sextile to Saturn, now back into Pisces, and that's going to be critical here in just a second. I'll tell you more about that. But Mercury is obviously here, the context of our thoughts, and Mercury is just a smidge away from moving itself into Virgo, where it is at home. But beginning early Monday morning and going through Thursday, we have 4 days of this yod this week. And this is exactly what I was talking about, is the configuration of this is how are we going to choose to handle and process this energy? Because the shakeup and the transformation, and now we're going to revisit everything about our spiritual base, is being shaken right now. It's being scattered. In fact, I took a look at the chart. Have a look at this. This is the chart with just the 10 planets and luminaries. Chiron is not on here, the midheaven, etc., not on here. Mark Edmund Jones categorized chart patterns based on how the planets were configured around the chart. And this one, except for one thing, except for Saturn and Neptune, which has kind of been our theme and focus so far today, this would be a splash pattern. It's not a technically exact splash pattern, but none of the other patterns match. This one at least matches, with the exception of that one conjunction, and that would not fit the pure definition of a splash. But the idea is that the planets are all just splattered around the chart, as you can see. We have an empty house here, and we have an empty house here, but every other house has something in it. And the idea of that is that we're talking about scattered energy. So somebody, if this was a natal birth chart, which it will be on Monday and Sunday and this week, that these kids will be multifaceted, and they'll have diverse interests, and they'll be able to talk about a lot of different subjects. But for us right now in the collective, I think a lot of what's going on is that we are scattered. I've heard from 2 people in just the last recent past who've said that they have in some way pulled away from their spiritual path. And obviously, when I come to mind, it's like, oh, coming back. I had the most beautiful compliment this week from a listener who I just adore, who had said that she had taken a break from her path. And I got a message that she had thought of me and was coming back, and she said that she really appreciated that I was just there, that she knew she could come back and I would be there and she could pick right back up. And boy, is that, talk about a touching message for myself, and very welcome at this time, because I'm living and experiencing this chart as well. So we are, if you're feeling scattered, and if you're feeling what's the purpose, and not having a direction, and that's the other thing that people are talking about, this lack of clarity, feeling like in limbo, suspended in space, not having this solid foot on the ground. Boom, there it is. Look at everything. I mean, you can't lock on to any kind of pattern. And if you have tight patterns in your chart where planets are grouped together, like I do, or all of the planets are on one side of the chart and you have a lot of empty houses on the other side, this is extra hard, because we are used to more concentrated focus and more concentrated energy. But now it's just like all over the place. So we just have to work through it, because by December, that structure will change. We're in it for a little while, but by December, things will start to group up again. And this chart, this chart shows it well, doesn't it? So when we put all the points back on, all the planets, the aspects and everything, blah! I mean, is that not going on in your mind right now? Blah! If Noel Teal can call Uranus bzz, then I can call this chart blah! It's like, whoa! So, yeah, that's exactly why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. Now, we were taking a look at the challenging aspects, and there really are not that many. So we have a little square here between Mars and Jupiter. I think that's pretty significant. So there is tension even around expansion. Things could expand in the wrong directions. But it's these quindeciles or quindeciles that I think are the other thing that we at least need to keep our eye on, because here's another one between Jupiter and Pluto. these are the compulsion areas. So there is this, see, and I mean, I don't want to emphasize and bring back and focus on last week, but that right there could have been another signature of what might have snapped with this. So snapping with, and see, it snapped, oversnapped, it overstepped. And that can happen. I mean, realize it, yes, it happened on a macro, and that was a sick situation. Could it also happen at the water cooler at the office? Or could it happen in an email? Or could it happen with a family member who you dearly love and don't want to offend? And yet, when you're dealing with this scattered energy, it could happen. And that brings me to the other point that I wanted to just fill you in on, this little concept that Ray Merriman is using to establish this evolutionary astrology book that I'm narrating to audio. I should have brought it. It's upstairs. But the way he starts this is back to our initial quote from Pierre. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. That's the physical world. And he talks about, I mean, obviously, we live this life. We come to Earth to be captured and encased in this physical reality. But truly, we are spiritual beings on this path. And that's what 90-something probably percent, I don't know the number, but I'm just throwing something down for conversation. 90-something percent of the people never lock onto that this is really about a spiritual path. And as he establishes this and then talks about the criteria or the premise of that spiritual path, is not that we're just here once and that's it. I mean, the soul is eternal. The body is not. This is just the body. The soul is eternal. And that's the real focus of Chardin's quote, is we're focusing on the spiritual, having a human experience. So what happens within that is that we are constantly faced with the opportunity to make a choice and to take an action. So we do something, and there's then created a consequence of that action. We write a terse email. There's a consequence. There's pushback on the other side, especially now. If we do something loving, that gets stored in the annals of the positive side. The reciprocal may not come back quite as fast as the negative, but it does stack our karmic ledger on the other side, the side that we really don't see and we don't focus on and we don't connect because we're so focused in this physical reality. But the point is that everything we do has a karmic impulse, karmic influence about it, and that is going to be reconciled and balanced. So for all the negative stuff, we will offset it, and that the natal chart, as Ray argues, is structured to show us what the karma is that we came in to deal with. And that's not just the nodes, it's the structure of the whole chart. And that's what this book is going to be about explaining, is each position, each planet, each setup, to show us from our own natal chart how that karma, how we brought that into this lifetime to work with, whether we find the path or not. So it just puts it in this beautiful context of the sky still guiding us in this much higher path, that if we could somehow quit looking at the world around us, that we would be able to see it for what it really is on the spiritual plane. And that's what Saturn going back into Pisces is going to be leading us into, is a revisit until 2051 is the next time that it comes in to Pisces. So for 30 years, basically, we're not going to experience the same load that we are between now and November of Saturn reminding us to look to the spiritual. And as Saturn moves in here to Pisces and moves to 25 degrees, it already, well, it's just almost within orb of a conjunction, 10 degrees. We're just outside of that. But it will pretty quickly be within 10 degrees. It moves up to 25. So it is moving toward the north node of the moon. And I think that's just a symbolism that's going to be asking us and inviting us to look at the choice that we have as human beings. Are we going to be living now in these changing times as this pyramid continues to unfold over the next 7 years? As all of that takes place, are we going to be willing to make the changes on our spiritual journey and focus on that more than the physical reality? Because by the time that Saturn moves all the way around and gets back over here to Pisces in 2051, a lot is going to have changed. Now, there are several other things happening this week. We'll touch on these quickly here. Mercury moves into Virgo. It rules Virgo, so it is at home. It is like, ah, la, 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 la. And it will be moving quickly to catch the sun and the south node, the tail of the dragon. So that's going to actually bring a positive spin to that. So remember that, and Kristin treats this so beautifully on Tuesday, that you will hear everything about Mercury in Virgo from a wonderful description. I'm going to leave that with her. Mercury in Virgo is going to give us some stability to our thinking that we were talking about all this scatteredness. Well, here is a little bit of rock of stability for about 3 weeks as Mercury makes its way quickly through its own sign. Then on Wednesday, the middle of the week, and this is what Kristin and I are going to do a video on, and we'll explain this more, but we have Mercury. I made confused more confused here. Mercury is in this square with Uranus, and Jupiter is in the trine and sextile to the nodes. And we've already shown you that, but I wanted to leave the spaghetti on there because isn't that how you're feeling? I mean, I want us to really get the mental image of this. I could have taken all that back out, but why? I mean, this is exactly what we're feeling. So we are going to have some tension around this little bit of rebel spirit that as Mercury is happy in its own sign, Uranus is going to come in and give it some bzzz from a more challenging perspective of Uranus in Gemini characteristics, which could be a little rebellious. So if you feel the rebel in you midweek, guard against that. Know that it's just part of this passing transit. Mercury moves very quickly. It will be out of the way within 2 days. By the end of the week, pretty much clear. And speaking of Uranus, that's the last big thing of the week. It happens early Saturday morning at just before 1 a.m. if you're on the East Coast. It will be on Friday night if you're on the western side of the United States. Uranus goes retrograde. Notice that it's got the RX, the red RX by it there. It is officially retrograde Saturday morning early, Friday night late. And it's a long one. It goes all the way through early February. We're going to have Mercury now joining these others. Now, a couple, like Saturn will start to come out, Uranus comes out, Pluto comes out in October. So some of these will shift out of retrograde. Uranus and Jupiter are still yet to go into retrograde. So we are going to be dealing with a little bit of that backwards rebellion, and that's where I was saying is with that square to Mercury, it is going to be a contrast there between Mercury wanting to be at home in Virgo and settle in and be structured as much as Mercury can be, but Uranus is going to be pushing on it, and when it's in that square, like all week this week, Uranus is super strong, powerful. And remember, Noel Teal's definition of Uranus was bzzzt. So we could have some bzzzt in the chart in our lives this week. In the chart, yes, it's there. We could have it in our lives if it shows up there as well. This is a lot to put together, but it is a lot. Let's summarize it just down to one kind of concept. Which side of the line are you on? I think it's a matter of pick one and make a commitment that whatever all of this throws at us, we're going to stay on that side of the line. We're going to choose. And as the beautiful listener reminded me this week for myself, I'll be there. If you need to step away a little bit, you want to come back, think of old Thomas, I'll be here. That's my commitment to you. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great week. Hope you heal this week. And may the benefic side of the universe be with us all. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.